Hello. So thank you everybody for being here. It's actually more people than I thought. So today I want to invite you to find a way to play with the monsters in our cities. And to start that, I want to ask you, what is living in the city like for you? So most people, when they think about cities, they think about a kind of hustle and bustle, about noise, about pollution, about density and speed, and about steel and concrete, but really rarely about nature. I very often hear that people feel like they are being put in a box and they cannot express themselves, and that they are disconnected from other people and the environment. And you know, climate change makes this even worse. Like, I think we all know that there's a kind of dread towards the future, like a paralysis, that makes us feel like we cannot tackle these grand challenges that inevitably will cause us great harm. But as architects, I think when I walk, for example, in Tokyo, almost every street has so much potential to dream of a better way of doing things. And so I want to start here and just show you in a random street, what can you do to improve the environment of the street? And so the first thing that anybody finds is just empty plots or some parking spaces. And we all know that this is a potential to change in the future. But actually, in this street in Tokyo, there's a hidden river. And many streets have this kind of hidden infrastructures that offer some potential to do something. And when I think about this, I begin to realize that actually these are not disconnected small opportunities, but actually there's a whole network of opportunities that we just have to link. And so at that point, even this kind of small pieces of nature or a small akia in the back of the street becomes a great potential to be an additional linking point in that network. And there's even more potentials that we normally don't think of, like, for example, spaces that we don't see, like roofs. And so with that attitude, my team and I started Emergent Lab. It's a design studio to focus on, by utilizing this kind of potentials, transforming the city, and doing that in a way that involves all the actors that own or participate in the spaces normally, and finding a way to empower them and to make a co-creation process. And so we didn't know how to do such a project, and so we undertook a kind of experimental design project to revitalize our ecosystem. And what you see here is the Shibuya River. And the reason why we chose this river was because it's almost completely forgotten. It's covered by highways. Most people only know it as a kind of dirty secret of like a place that we don't talk of. But actually, connected to this river, there's a lot of cultural sites. And so we thought that if you can find the potential of a great ecosystem and the quality of life that results from that in the city center of Tokyo, in such a place, then that would really showcase the potential of this approach. And so I just want to begin by showing you a few pictures to give you an overview of how complicated such a project would be. And surprisingly, I want to begin with the fact that there's actually a lot of nature left. There's a lot of parks and also a lot of important cultural sites, like, for example, Meiji Jingu. And when I see this kind of juxtaposition of the shrine of industrialization within such a large park, I really think that the original vision for cities like Tokyo was a really harmonious way of living with these ecosystems. But clearly, I think we have forgotten this, because today, everything connected to these ecosystems is just how to engineer it in a way that we can mitigate the flood risk, or the demographic challenges of finding all the labor to maintain all these infrastructures. Or from a capitalistic perspective, how to get rid of the ecosystem as much as possible to build more skyscrapers. And yeah, we think of the pollution and the smell, but not of the potential. And so I think it's important to know that actually the whole city is built on watersheds like the one of the Shibuya River. And this is what the watershed looks like today. We call it a bioregion. And every site within this area is connected and influenced by this river system. And so everyone within this area would benefit from an actual functioning river system and bioregion. And so I just want to point out a few spots that you know where we are. So here, for example, we have Shibuya Station with a lot of development and a lot of corporations investing a lot of money into new construction. And then less than a kilometer away, we have Meiji Jingu, such an important cultural site. And so I think by the size of this bioregion of 23 square kilometer and the density of actors and the amount of concrete, you can get a good glimpse at how complicated such a revitalization would be. And so at this point, my team and I kind of realized that as architects, there's no way that we can know so much about such an ecosystem that we can just come up with the perfect design. In fact, we begin to consider the river more like a living being that has so many facets that all have to be tended to and be empathic about and learned about, so that we can actually come up with a way of designing such an ecosystem. And so that is how we came to think of this kind of project more like a process of seeing this monstrosity that is really hard to tame and trying to figure out what such a process of empathy and listening and learning about the ecosystem could be to turn it into a friend, like almost like a kami. And so the question is how to do this, how to be empathic to such a monster. And so I want to start again with this kind of super naive idea of just looking for potentials. And so that is what we did. We mapped the whole bioregion for all potentials that we found. But this is of course not enough. Actually, what you also need to know is what infrastructures are there, what influences the water quality, what actors, and what places are really important and what not. And also, how can you motivate the actors behind these places to act and to collaborate and to create a network of allies of the river. And then, of course, also a lot of cultural information, like, for example, what are the kaiwais along the river like, and in what direction do we want to develop these neighborhoods? What is the quality of life that we want to achieve? And so we realized that it is very difficult to deal with this kind of very different types of information. And not only what I was just mentioning, but in the future we are also talking about really biological information or economic information or information technologies. And so finding a way to find and document all this kind of transdisciplinary information in a way that is actionable and leads to actual collaboration is one of the key challenges that we try to address in this project. And so I want to tell you about a workshop where we try to document social information about the actors in this area and how they maybe can collaborate. So what we did was we undertook 6 interviews with different actors, like for example a huge developer, an NPO, or a Shotengai. And we just always asked them, what are the concrete projects that they have, what wishes do they actually have, and what challenges do they see? And we did that not in a kind of interview session, but we invited them to a walking exploration of a section of the river that is important to them and try to practice the empathy in the process of also discovering the river and discovering the problems in reality. And so during rain and during super strong heat, we explore the potential of mitigating climate change in the river, for example. And so after that, we made a workshop and we came up with hundreds of designs to improve this river very concretely. Like, for example, someone came up with a cafe on the river to make use of the cooling quality of our ecosystem. Or someone had this idea to involve the train companies and link the train station directly with the cultural sites, bypassing all the commercial districts. And we didn't stop there. After that, we retraced the routes that we walked and superimposed it on the maps of potential that we found. And we asked everybody to directly locate the ideas that they had or the challenges that they see on this map, so that if they had an idea, it would match an actual existing opportunity for a project. And so if you do that for all these different groups, you can arrive at this kind of map. And you see that different actors overlap. And it can happen, for example, that a shrine and a huge developer have the same kind of interest or a similar interest in an area. And by overlapping these different ideas, you can find opportunities for collaboration. And I just want to show one of those. So here, for example, when you see it concretely, it becomes almost like an opportunity for like a charter of co-creation of such a project. And so this is the idea that I mentioned, where the shrine and the developer had the same idea to collaborate on revitalizing the river and linking the different kaiwai of shrines with the river. And now I want to show you how such a process could look like in a normal neighborhood along the river. So here you see the river is being covered by a highway. There is a shotengai and also a big developer. And there's a lot of opportunities almost everywhere to do projects. And so I just want to say, in this kind of project, we are actually not waiting for many years to buy a lot of land to build a big skyscraper. In reality, any kind of small project, any kind of spark is already enough to start such a project. And so let's just imagine that the shotengai starts this project by building a rain garden and maybe a small cafe, like we mentioned before. And I think this would be immediately a hit. It would strengthen the quality of the neighborhood, and it would also put the shotengai culturally on the map. But this, again, it can happen everywhere. It can happen that the developer builds a promenade, or some individual just builds a nice roof garden for themselves. And so I think this is where a project like ours could start. Because through this prior research that we have been doing, we know of all these activities that are going on. And so our first task would be to make these groups aware of each other and form a community, linking these groups up. And from that kind of activity, we could establish a hub of knowledge that agglomerates all this listening practice and transdisciplinary knowledge into a place that is easy to access for everybody, from a small actor all the way to a corporate actor, and that can facilitate collaboration. And I think from such a place, we can get to a point where from each project we are learning what is the actual concrete impact of this project ecologically or socially or also economically, and we can motivate new projects. Like, for example, just two examples that I give you here is maybe the developer and the shotengai can start to collaborate to extend the promenade. Or maybe we find another actor, like for example a shrine, and start a kind of pop-up project to promote this neighborhood. And so I think as this iterative learning process keeps going and takes pace, we can see a kind of cascading process of playing and filling all these potentials and getting more and more precise as we learn. And maybe this community also gets a kind of hub that then becomes the clubhouse of the monster. And I think here's also another great potential of this approach, because we really don't know the challenges of the future. The fear that we had in the beginning is really true, because we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe the city going to have way less people, or it's going to be super hot. It even can happen that it's cold. And so we always have to anticipate that we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so because of that, I think such a slow iterative process of always being adapting and never actually finishing the project, always leaving things unresolved, is exactly the way how we can deal with this kind of fear that we all feel in the beginning in a very proactive way. And so I think if we do that in that way and grow as a community, in the end maybe this hub can even foster larger projects, like for example transforming the highway. And so with that, I just want you to imagine what only 10% of such a project would mean. Because this would already have a great impact, even small projects. This already would improve the urban heat island effect very much. It would reduce heat stroke and it would save us heat cooling energy. But it would also improve all the neighborhoods along the river. And it would increase the living quality of everybody, something that really every scale of actor can benefit from. So everybody is incentivized in participating in such a project. And I think once we realize this, more than 10% is also definitely possible. I think it's just a question of time, actually. And so with that, I want to end the talk by just encouraging you to realize this paralysis of the future and act on it by finding the monster in your city, because this kind of monster actually exists everywhere, and just find a way to play or dance with it and have a little bit of fun and building a community of caring for the monster. Thank you very much.